Well, today we have with us Ethan, and Ethan has suffered from cannabis-induced psychosis about 5 years ago. And we're really glad that he's experienced recovery and is sober and is living a full and productive life in Colorado. And he wants to speak out about cannabis-induced psychosis in Colorado and other states as well. We're grateful to have him here today to share his experience and strength and hope with us. So thank you, Ethan, for coming today and for providing us with encouragement and hope, and for having the courage to share your story with the Every Brain Matters community. And the floor is now yours.
Awesome. Thanks for the introduction. So yeah, right now I'm working full-time at a cybersecurity company called Prophecy International. I do some software troubleshooting, and I also plan on going back to school part-time to get my degree. Wasn't the story 5 years ago, that's for sure, but let's see. I'm going to begin way at the beginning on why I started smoking weed, about when I did it and who was involved, the who, what, when, where. So I was around 16. I think it was my junior year at high school, and it was what everybody was doing. It's just kind of the cliche. You're at a party, hey, try this. It's fun. It's just weed. It comes from the ground. It's perfectly safe and healthy. And, I thought if I wasn't doing pills, if I wasn't doing heroin, if I wasn't doing anything else like that, then it's just weed. I'll be okay. So sure enough, I tried it at a party and I loved it. I got upset. I got hooked on it really fast. I didn't know how much it helped my anxiety, or at least I thought it did at the time. I was always an anxious kid, and I would self-medicate with it. It started to become recreational and half self-medication, but it quickly got abused and out of hand. So fast forward to my senior year, I started really struggling with my grades. I started almost dropping out of school. I had 1D and all Fs. That's coming from a student I had a B average. So I had like a 3.0, 3.2 throughout all of high school. And all my teachers were kind of wondering, like, what's going on? Are you okay? Are you something else? Is something personal going on? And I always just said, no, I'm fine. Brushed everybody off, because that was the one thing that stoners had in common, is they don't kind of realize it's affecting them. They say, I can quit whenever I want. I'm just as productive on it as I am without, even though I always had straight Fs, and there's evidence to the contrary the whole time. But not only did my grades sunk, but I was also getting in a lot of trouble. I would bring weed to school. I would bring my bong, leave it in my car. But there's one particular moment where things started to really kind of cascade into events and had this butterfly effect that led up to psychosis. Okay. So me and my best friend Kari at the time got super high, and we decided it was a good idea to break into our local middle school. So we climbed the top of the roof of this middle school, and through the janitor's entrance, we could go through the top and kind of make your way in. So that's what we did. We went inside, started walking around the school. It was like 12 in the morning, and we didn't steal anything, but we were kind of messing around. And at the time, I think, yeah, we were in the main hallway and we heard like a clicking sound, and it kind of startled us. So we left. And as we're on top of the building, we see like 4 squad cars, the K9 unit, all these police vehicles out on parking in front. So we jumped off the building, literally jumped off the building, rolled on the grass and hid. But my car was parked in the parking lot, so there was no point of us trying to run away. So I kind of pulled my friend. I was like, you're going down with me. I was like, you're not getting away. I'm not taking the heat for this. So we both raise our hands up. We walk forward. We get tackled. We get handcuffed, the whole 9 yards. He ended up doing community service. I ended up joining diversion program. And this was my chance to stop smoking weed. This was my chance to give it up and live a fulfilling life and leave it. You know, some people would learn like, hey, I'm getting in serious trouble with this, I should stop now. But with diversion, it's kind of like a forced counseling. It's kind of it helps you expunge misdemeanors off your record. So you do like group therapy, you go out. It was actually pretty nice, but the one thing I hated about it was I had to do a drug test every 2 weeks. And this was for 9 months. So every 2 weeks, I would down a bunch of water. I would take these special pills that would just destroy my gut, just destroy every trace of the marijuana. And I would do that every 2 weeks, and I'd get sick, but I had to do anything to keep smoking. I told my therapist I wasn't smoking. I told her like I was doing just fine. And that's how addicted I was. Like I was completely, and I'd even show up to some of the meetings high. And I bet she knew, and I bet she was just trying to get it out of me, but she never could. With that being said, I did cut back a little bit because it was getting exhausting having to keep doing that drug testing and that flushing of my system. So I cut back. But as soon as that 9 month was over, I was right back at it full force. But this time, my sister's ex-boyfriend introduced me into something called dabbing. And dabbing, if you guys are probably well familiar, but it's wax form of marijuana. It's very high potency. It's called glass shatter. And it was the worst decision of my life to start smoking that. And at first I took one dab, and I think it was about 40% THC. So you're already at like 3 or 4 times the regular bud amount. And it felt just like a normal high, just stronger. And I thought, well, this is great. Now I have a means that doesn't smell, doesn't stink up the house. So my mom won't find out. And now I can get twice as high. And now I can get my friends on it. I can get everybody doing this new thing called dabbing. So you basically have to buy a heated torch, like a giant torch, a butane torch, and heat up a spoon or heat up a bong and melt the wax on top of it and inhale it. And what I want to tell parents is like, because a lot of them ask me, I was like, well, how do you catch your kid in the act? What are the signs that they're smoking or that they're dabbing? Because if it doesn't smell like weed, it doesn't have that skunk smell, then what's going on? Like, what did your mom do? All this. And I was talking to Aubrey about it. And if you're starting to miss some of your, or if you started to notice that some of your fabric softener sheets are missing, or if you know some of your spoons are missing, or so even like some of your paper towel rolls are missing because they're using that to mask the scent, like blow it out like that. That was a dead giveaway that my mom noticed that she started missing. Like, where's all, I should say, I know you're not doing laundry. So where is this going to? And anyway, so I got in pretty heavy into dabbing. School was a past responsibility for me. I completely just gave up on school. I somehow scraped by and graduated. And then came the summer of 2017. That was when I was free range to do whatever I want. So I dabbed and did all stupid things with hotbox. So I'd lock myself in a car with my friend and we'd smoke it up. So like you couldn't breathe in it besides marijuana. That's something really common. And, I would get high daily. I couldn't sleep without it. And it took from one dab to feel something. So started taking 2 or 3 to feel the same effect. That standard tolerance building that you hear from. It wasn't, and this is when it started really becoming a problem because it got expensive. As you get $30 for about a couple grams of shatter, and then you go through about a gram a day. It starts, you're spending hundreds of dollars a week. And of course, me and my friend stole money from my mom. We started selling our belongings. He started robbing from our friends, and we would do anything we could just to get high. And we were so oblivious to what we were doing. We still thought it was just weed. We could quit whenever we want. It's whatever. Um, and all was good until I was sitting down on the couch. I just got done dabbing, and I hear my mom, and she yells my name at the top of her lungs. She goes, "Ethan," super loud. And none of my friends heard it. So I'm like, I get up and I'm like, oh, okay, let me go check that out. And they're all confused. And I run upstairs and she's asleep. So she never even called my name. So I was hearing her voice and I didn't really think anything of it. I was like, well, that was odd. I could have sworn she just yelled my name, but didn't think anything of it. So I went back and smoked again. And this time I was hearing the sound of the crunching of food. So like cat food, that kind of crunching sound that they make when they eat, so oddly specific. But I was hearing that, and I had 4 cats, so I didn't think anything weird. It just kind of was like white noise. But then I look over to the food bowl and there's no cats eating, and the sound of the food gets louder as I look at the food bowl, and it's like this crunching sound that encompasses my head. And I start kind of grabbing my head and like shaking and going crazy. And I told everybody, get out of my house, go, get out. They're like, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know, just get out. And at the time, my best friend Kari lived with me, and he was like, dude, you're just toking out, you're having a bad trip. So I stopped doing that, or I stopped for like a couple days for my head to clear up a little bit. And then things started to get bad again. I started, every time I smoked, I'd get paranoid. I'd get suspicious of Kari and about his intentions and about what he's doing. And that turns out some of those suspicions were correct, but we'll get to that. But I remember I started, at the time, I didn't know what was going on, but I started getting obsessed with inanimate objects. I started thinking that this green towel that's hanging on my railing, that symbolizes something, and the universe is trying to tell me something. Why is this towel green? I have to get to the bottom of it. I have to figure out. So I was spending all of this whole day, then the next couple of days, like researching the color green, or getting obsessed with like, why is this towel green, and very bizarre fixations. And then went from a green towel to a white lighter, and it went from just random objects, and I would obsess over them, and I would pull my hair out trying to like figure out what they all meant and how they all connected to each other. And my friend at the time was like, well, you better get to the bottom of it. And I don't think he realized he was feeding my delusion there. So I got that really, because I was like, oh my gosh, he gets it. I got to figure it out before he does, kind of thing. And that was that. And that's not even the worst part. So I continued to go back to smoking weed, because I didn't put 2 and 2 together. I didn't realize that the weed was causing this, because it was happening while I was sober as well. So I thought, this is just odd, but it's not the weed. So I continued smoking. And that's when I found out one night that Kari, my best friend, was stealing money from my mom without me knowing. And my mom pulls me aside and shows me her bank statements, and there's about $3,000 missing from her checking account over the span of like 6 months. And at that point, I was completely livid. Obviously, I kicked him out of the house, and I never saw him since. Like, that was the last time I've seen him, and to this day, it's the last time I see him. And of course, I go back to my bong, and this time, instead of dabbing, I just smoke weed, just normal weed. And I remember feeling a snap in my brain. Like, it literally felt like something like it snapped. All of a sudden, my sanity was just altered. I started hearing voices, having conversations in my head. I was having conversations with family members and friends, and I was getting in arguments with them. I was fighting with them in my head and having full-blown conversations about random topics, and it was really bizarre. And at the time, my mom kind of brushed it off as anxiety, because she didn't know what was going on. I'm like, Mom, this is not anxiety. There's something going on with me. And I call that day D-Day because that was kind of the turning point. That was when my psychosis officially began. And the very next day I had to go to work, and I go in and I worked at this factory assembly line just for a summer job, just to get some extra cash. And I'm starting to assemble these pieces, and I get these voices in my head like, "You're doing it wrong," or "Stop doing that. Stop doing that. You're messed." And it just bombard me with these voices in my head, and I just could not focus on work. So I went up to my boss and I quit. I quit that day, and I was like, I can't work. I don't know what's going on with me. I can't work. I can't focus. And that basically began the most terrifying couple of months of my life. So I started, obviously, I stopped smoking. That was the first thing. So that's what was interesting, is my psychosis didn't go away for like 2 months, even when I stopped smoking weed. Um, and some of the side effects I felt were just terrible. I remember driving home from my friend's house, and there'd be moments of clarity where I'd feel normal, or at least appear normal on the surface, but my head was still going in spirals. But I was driving home from my friend's house, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with Stephen King's It, with the balloon. And I looked in my rear view mirror, and I see this red balloon kind of floating by behind me. I'm like, that's a little cliche and bizarre, you know? I'm like, that's whatever. And I tried to go to bed that night, but I couldn't sleep. I was like, wait a minute, did I actually see a balloon, or was I hallucinating, or what was that? So I go outside at like 2 in the morning when it's snowing out, in just my boxers, and I start walking for hours trying to find this balloon. And I'm looking around, and I'm like, and I'm like telling myself, here come the thoughts again, the voices. Well, if I find it, I'm not crazy, because if I find the balloon, that means it's there, which means I'm not crazy. And of course, I never found it. And that was I think that was the only true visual hallucination I had. There was some times where I would see an object and kind of misinterpret it, if that makes sense. Like, I would look at a jacket on the floor and think it's my dog, and come up to it and be like, whoa, that's not my dog. And that happened a lot. um the worst thing for me by far was mixing dreams with reality. So it's so hard to explain when you're in a stable mind, but basically I couldn't distinguish from what was real and what I just dreamt of. There'd be moments where I'd be hanging out with my friends. I'd be like, hey, remember when we did this? And they'd be like, what are you talking about? And it was then I realized it was a dream I had. And that happened quite a bit. And sometimes I thought the dreams meant something. I thought, I had this really bizarre one, because Kari was known for stealing stuff, stole my mom's cameras, stole all this stuff. And I'd have dreams of me finding it in particular drawers, and I'd run around the house opening those drawers when I woke up, and of course it's not there. But that was a theme of, because was thinking the universe was telling me things. Um, and another thing, I was super paranoid and suspicious of other people. I was shopping at King Supers, and the receipt was printing out, and the lady next to me was kind of looking at the receipt printing out, and I snatched it really quick. And then she kind of looked at me like, okay. But I thought if she took that receipt, she would have information about me. And I thought, like, she would know, like, if she took that receipt, she would know about me, whatever that meant. Like, she would. It was weird. And when I was driving home, I would always go in circles to make sure nobody was tailing me. And yeah, I lived like that for about 2 months, and it was the worst experience of my life. And to get out of it, I basically stayed abstinent, which was the main part. But I also took fish oil, started exercising, eating better. And I, not saying it cured it, but for me, I like to think that it did help. Um, I started seeing walk-in therapy, because I knew something was wrong. That was one thing that distinguishes mine from a lot of cases is I had a lot of insight. Like I had some delusions and I had some hallucinations, but I knew something was off the entire time. I knew, I was like, that's, something's not right. And um I think that's important and a sign of hope, that if your kid has insight and knows like something's wrong, or knows that they're going downhill, like has that insight, that's a really, really good sign. And it's a poor sign. It's not impossible, but it's a poor sign if they're um having multiple episodes and not connecting the dots and realizing one connects to the other, or that weed is causing it. But and if but or if they are having multiple episodes and they're still smoking even though they know weed causes it, um that's where therapy and just knowing, keeping it out of the house, just knowing, like, looking for missing detergent sheets, looking for spoons, looking for where money is going, like even monitoring banking accounts, cash, it's, sometimes you got to be that parent, you got to be that strict parent and monitor stuff, and even show them statistics, like people who go through cannabis-induced psychosis, half of them end up getting schizophrenia within the next 10 years, and if that doesn't scare them, I don't know what will, to be honest. There's the just the idea of going insane, and I know some people with schizophrenia can still have fulfilling lives, but not without tremendous support. And weed-induced psychosis is a temporary form of schizophrenia. That's what the symptomology is the same. It's just induced by cannabis. And um sorry if I'm going off on a tangent, but it's important to realize, like, you have multiple chances to kind of reroute your brain so you're not going down, you're not constantly rewiring your brain to, you're messing up your receptors and getting into that psychotic state of mind. Because that's one thing, is once you start thinking psychotically and not clearly, that's when your brain gets used to thinking like that, and it creates patterns of thinking like that, and that's when it becomes more long term and more um chronic. So a lot of people are like, well, my psychosis isn't getting away. And it's like, well, did you stop smoking? And they go, no. And it's like, well, because it's altering your state of mind. It's altering how you think and how you process information. But besides that, I pretty much stayed abstinent for 5 years. I had a slip up about a year ago. Um, I was kind of testing how my brain was doing. I know that sounds stupid, but I was like, if I smoke right now and I just have a good time and I feel fine, that means I've healed, right? That means that was my logic. I was like, that means I'm better. That means nothing. Um, I'm not going to smoke all I want, but it was just kind of just out of curiosity. So I just took a little joint, couple puffs, and instantly I got paranoid. I got super suspicious, even just off of marijuana, even just off of flower now. And that was years after my psychosis, and instantly paranoid, instantly suspicious of others around me. So I stopped doing it. That was my official last time a year ago, but I took a 4-year gap and then smoked, and then another 1-year gap now. And I thought that was it. I thought that was a closed chapter, and it was in my past. It was behind me. I can move on. Oh, little did I know it would come and bite me in the butt a couple months ago. And I didn't start smoking again, but I kind of questioned my mental health. I was like, you know what I'm kind of feeling off. What did happen to me during that one summer? What was that? I was like, what was I feeling? Like, was that caused by cannabis? Like, what did I go through? So I started looking into it, cannabis-induced psychosis, and that's where I found these groups. But before I found the good stuff, I found all the bad stuff. And that was things, articles about prognosis for cannabis-induced psychosis and the outlook for patients who go through it. You know, even without a history of mental illness, 40% of people who go through an episode develop chronic illness and develop schizophrenia. And the fact that it can change the structure of your brain, the brain chemistry, if you smoke before you're 25. all this stuff. And so I started obsessively researching, like, how do I recover my brain? How do I bounce back? You know, is the damage already done? Is my IQ lowered for good? Is my brain doomed? And I was so obsessed with those thoughts and I didn't like the chance of becoming schizophrenic. I didn't like that 50% chance at all. So I actually had a suicide attempt on this last November. I was driving and I closed my eyes and I almost swerved into the median next to me, but then I kind of snapped out of it. I was like, what am I doing? And I checked myself in. Um, and I stayed at this awful mental institution where I was there with people who were much more sick than me and unfortunate than me. And that was not good for me because that was seeing like what I could become. And, um, if anything, if your child isn't afraid of cannabis-induced psychosis, bring him to a mental institution for a day. See, like, that could be you. Like, it was surreal. And I felt like I was in a movie. I felt like my life was over. All my friends would be having these careers and fulfilling lives, and I'd be in and out of hospitals and being a burden my whole life. And all because I smoked 5 years ago. I was clean now, but I felt very scared and I felt like it wasn't over yet. Like, I'm just waiting for, I'm still in that 10-year bracket where I can get schizophrenia. I'm just waiting for that ticking time bomb to go off. But it hasn't, and I'm here. But when I was released from the hospital, I still started getting obsessed with articles about it, and I started researching, what it does to the brain and what it does to your IQ. And I got so obsessive to the point where I actually spent $800 on an MRI. So I got an MRI scan, and kind of helped my OCD and my obsession about it. And they found these little spots of white matter on my brain, and they said it was normal for my age, but they also said it could be from a remote insult. So, and I'm thinking remote insult, I'm thinking, is that marijuana, and I never got an answer for that, but it could possibly be, because some of the research I did, they said it affects the white and gray matter in your brain when you're young. And I'm no doctor, and I'm not going to get into that and pretend like I know what I'm talking about, but the MRI, it was interesting. And I also took the Ways for IQ test, which is the official like adult IQ test that costed another $500. So I'm trying to feed my anxiety by taking all these tests to assure myself that I'm okay. For the IQ test, what I found interesting is it's split into 4 separate categories. One of which is working memory. So I scored pretty much 90th percentile on all of them, except for working memory. And working memory is something that's known to be negatively affected by cannabis use. And that my psychiatrist was like, it's very interesting that you have one category that's so low and the rest are so high. She's like, that's usually indicative of like, could be brain damage, or it could just be something you're weak at. If I also have ADD, so my working memory is not the best, but she's like, that's a big dip. And, I thought back to weed, like, could that have, permanently altered my memory? And I'll never know. I'll never have that before and after, because I don't remember what it was like before weed. And anyway, that was that. I took tests and I stayed clean, and I found out about Kari, my old best friend. I reached out to his ex-girlfriend to kind of rekindle that relationship, that friendship. Apparently he's didn't stop smoking. He's still stealing. Hasn't been employed for 3 out of the 5 years that we've been not talking to each other. And I think the most terrifying part is friends that I have now. One of them came up to me the other day when we were eating. It wasn't the other day, it was like a month ago, but looked at me and said, "Do you ever get vivid dreams?" And he he smokes a lot. He smoked since he was 12 up until now, and he's 21, and he hasn't stopped. So daily since then. And he asked me, do you ever have vivid dreams? And I knew exactly what that meant. I knew exactly. I was like, you need to cut it out. I was like, you need to stop smoking. And I don't know if he has still. I haven't heard from him in a while. And once you realize it's not a one-off, that it happens to other kids, it's very, very, it's sad. But luckily, I'm right here. I think my story was an exception. I know afterwards I had that hospitalization, but that was more because of my own anxiety about the aftermath and if I'm going to get schizophrenia or if it's going to come back. But, I stayed abstinent, and there's no reason for me to believe it's going to come back if I don't smoke. And I know there's still that risk, but I'm doing fine now. That's all you can do. You can thank the stars above that you're one of the lucky ones. And the fact that kids are going through this kind of breaks my heart, and it just makes you realize, like, recovery is possible. It is. You just have to you have to want your life to pan out the way you want it to. Like, you can't expect everything to get better. You have to really care about your future. And that's a hard thing to tell somebody who's super young. I'm 23, but telling somebody, a high schooler, like, to think longevity in terms of long term is really hard for them to grasp. But if you could just get that point across, like, you're smoking all this weed and you're functioning, but imagine how good you'd be if you weren't. Imagine what you could accomplish if you weren't smoking the weed. I know you're getting by now, but imagine if you took that out of the picture, what else you could be doing. And other than that, I just hope parents know that recovery is possible, and but they'd have to want to do it. That's the hard part. And at least, I'd say, I don't know if I should say this, but at least try to get them to stop dabbing. Like, if you can kind of hone them down to from dabbing to just smoking plant, it's not the best. Obviously, it's still terrible, but just to get the high potency stuff out of the equation might make it easier for them to quit the low potency stuff. Because there's stuff upwards of 99% THC. It's like pure liquid, and I've tried that before, and I basically blacked out. And your brain is not built for that at all. So, other than that, I think, sorry if I rambled on a little bit, but that is pretty much all I got. I'm open for questions.
Does anybody have any questions or comments or anything they want to ask Ethan?
Thanks so much. Wow. I got a lot out of your talk. I really appreciate it. So have you tried any like Marijuana Anonymous or any kind of programs like that?
I have not. And actually, there's one thing I forgot to mention. This is a sign of hope also. I remember telling you guys that I almost failed out of high school, but I took a semester off. That was during my psychosis. And then I went back to school and got a 4.0
Wow.
in college my first semester.
Yeah.
That was awesome. And I got on some good medication to help with my anxiety. And I know there's some people who are skeptical about medication, but my favorite analogy is you wouldn't take insulin away from a diabetic. If you need it, you need it.
Yeah.
Other than that, I kind of forgot your question. My bad. What was it?
Oh, no, that's fine. So I guess you did therapy, but you didn't do any kind of like
Marijuana Anonymous. I did not. I know my friend who was actually going through the psychosis around the same time I was, except for his was more manic. He had a cannabis-induced manic episode.
Okay.
And he started getting all these coins and tokens from staying sober, and I thought that was pretty cool, and kind of wish I got more involved with that, but I had no temptations to ever smoke again.
That's great.
That's so great. Yeah, I didn't need a group to like tell me not to smoke, because I knew never to do it again.
Wow. Great job. So proud of you. Great
Oh,
job.
thanks, Bart.
I just want to thank you for speaking to us tonight. And it does give us hope, I think, for those of us parents who, are dealing with this. My son's your age and he's just 6 months sober now, and
Which
he's
is
still
huge.
on medication, but he had 3 episodes and he had the manic type as well. But initially he didn't attribute it to the marijuana. So it took repeated episodes for him to, and lots of therapy with a great therapist for him to recognize the triggers. And so I just appreciate you standing up and speaking. I just hope and pray someday he'll find the strength to be able to speak out to other students, because I think the students are going to take it much better from someone like yourself who's been through it and is young, and you're closer to their period of life. And, I think that's just wonderful that you're speaking up and trying to help others. And I'm so glad you're doing well.
Huge. Thanks, Jackie. Yeah, 6 months is huge. That's a really good sign.
Thanks.
Yeah, you should be grateful for that. That's huge.
Yeah, how you doing, Ethan?
Hey, Mike.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks again for speaking. It's really powerful, for you to share. We have a 19-year-old son that he exhibits a lot of the things that you were talking about. He's admitted to some OCD, but he doesn't communicate with us very much about kind of exactly what his things are. I know there's a lot of intrusive thoughts and different things like that.
Right.
And I know you said about, I guess it was like 2 months or so that I think you said something like 2 months, and then after the psychosis episodes that you just decided, like, was there a specific catalyst, or was it just some fear, or that made you kind of what turned the corner for you there to want to seek some help?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think my friends started to notice some differences in me. I remember after the initial 2 months of going through psychosis kind of was over, it was almost like this psychosis withdrawal period where I was a really obsessed spirituality wise. I started asking all my friends, like, do you think there's life after death? Asking all these personal religious questions, just getting really obsessed with that, and obsessed with death, and obsessed with life, and just part of self-discovery. And I realized that my mind just cannot handle weed, and I'm trying to think of the exact moment where I was like, yeah, I can't smoke again. And I think seeing what it did to other people, and I haven't seen a single one of my friends turn out well that smokes. Not a single one. I haven't, even if they smoke occasionally, I don't know anybody, not even just friends, I don't know anybody who is living a fulfilling life if they're smoking weed. Just point blank. And I saw the patterns. I don't want to be cocky and say I was smart enough to stop, but I knew I just couldn't do it. I was worried about my brain. I was worried about, you only get one chance to develop your brain. And I was just praying that it would rebound and recover. And sure enough, here I am.
I'd like to just say thank you too, because I have a child the same age as you.
Oh.
And she's doing better, but I know that it's, the using is still going on. So, it's a tough, I know that I don't know what to do, since you're the same age and all of that. Her friend had psychosis, but they are not friends now. So I know I've seen a lot of things with what's going on, and I always wondered why my spoons were gone. I thought they were just throwing them away randomly in the trash.
So you think they're still dabbing though?
That was a while back ago. I don't know about that. I don't know. I really don't know.
Like some signs to look out for. They'll be really quiet and kind of timid, especially if they're going through psychosis. They'll be kind of out of it and constantly, at least that was for me. I was very, when I had to be normal per se, when I had to be normal and get myself together, I was very quiet, very kind of on edge, and super anxious around friends and asking them a bunch of reassuring questions and things like
Oh,
that.
interesting.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
if they're like constantly seeking like reassurance that, you know, things are going to be okay, or I think that's one of the signs. I'm not, you know, I'm not an expert on it, but that's how I was, and that's how I've seen my friends do it too. They can't, you know, that was like my friend, like, have you ever had vivid dreams? Or, you know, have you ever, you know, they'll start to show concern.
Well, thank you. It's just very helpful. I'm very happy that you shared this with us. And I know you'll go on to share your experience, strength, and hope with a lot of other people. It'll be very helpful. And I know you're going to go on and do well too.
How did you deal with your existing friends who were users? I know you're not friends with Kari anymore, but how did you, and what was their reaction when you explained you were stopping and why? And have you gone on to get a whole new set of friends that won't have anything to do with pot or drugs?
So I was kind of lucky with the group of friends I had. This probably won't be a helpful answer, but a lot of them, when I quit, they were kind of on board with it because they kind of seen how I was acting around it. Or Kari, on the other hand, I was like, I need to quit, I need to take a break. He's like, yeah, right, you're going to be back into it. So he didn't kind of believe me that I wanted to quit. And I was kind of like, oh, maybe you're right. And so you got to have that support system. But when I decided to quit for good, I think I did lose some friends. I think I lost, because that was all we really did. That's all we did when we hung out. And I think at the same time, a lot of them were jealous. A lot of them were, and they would never admit it, but when I said I quit, you could kind of see their eyes just kind of go, oh wow, like this, it's done, you know. It's this bizarre realization. And I have gotten new friends, and none of them smoke. They have nicotine problems, but that's a whole separate thing. That's vaping is a whole nother story. But yeah, as far as my old friends go, after what went down with me and Kari and having him steal so much money from my mom, they kind of understood why I quit. And I've had some people kind of egg me on and be like, well, it's been so long since that happened, like just try it, like no pressure, but you should really try it, that kind of thing, you know. And you know, it's been long enough, you'll be fine, your brain's fine. And I just, again, I have honestly PTSD from that psychosis. I just don't do it. I've always had that willpower that's like, no, I can't do it. And finding that willpower was hard. I mean, I was a heavy smoker. I probably taken over like 1,000 dabs. Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of a miracle how I'm still functioning right now. I think about that a lot. I'm like, I've only dabbed for about 2 years, but it was 2 years nonstop. And you know, and I think of it as I did it during my developing period of my brain, but I also stopped during the developing period of my brain. So I felt like I gave it a chance to kind of rebound and connect new pathways. That's how I cope with it. That's how I believe what happened. But you know, obviously I'm doing great, and I still got some mental issues, but you know, it's what kind of came first, the chicken or the egg kind of thing. But I can't say that weed caused all my issues, but I can say it did make it worse. I can say for certainty it made it worse. Whatever I was going through, it made it a lot worse. And you know, I would never have been hospitalized if I didn't smoke weed. I would have never. This was 5 years after the fact, you know, so this has nothing to do with pot. That's what people don't understand. It's like, yeah, you want to stop smoking, but going through psychosis is traumatic, and it's you, and when you go back years, you're just like, oh my gosh, what was that? And you start to kind of reminisce on it. You kind of freak yourself out. It almost causes PTSD. So psychosis alone can do its, when you're out of it, can do its number on you.
Thank you so much for doing this tonight. I know how helpful it is to the parents that are here, that are living with this in their households with use or in recovery stages. My son didn't make it. My son died by suicide after years of using. It was 8 years ago. So he wasn't dabbing. I don't think there was such a thing, at least not where I live in Arizona at the time. I do believe the high potency in the dabbing makes it ever so much more dangerous. But just the substance itself in certain brains at certain ages is dangerous. There's no amount that's safe. And Ethan, your message is so important for young people to hear and for parents to hear, to understand the danger and the consequences. Your message is so important. If you can continue to share it, you'll affect many people's lives. People will be so grateful for that. Bart had asked you about Marijuana Anonymous. Marijuana Anonymous is not only to help you not use yourself. You're probably very safe from that, but it's a forum where your message can be heard by the people who need to hear it, and your participation, even if it's just occasional or once, somebody will hear something you say and make a change in their lives and in your friends' lives. You used the term insight at one point, and I can tell you've done a lot of reading and understanding things, and I gained great understanding from my attending. It was actually Al-Anon meetings when my son was having not alcohol issues but marijuana issues, which at the time I thought was mental health issues. He didn't share it with me. It was marijuana. We didn't know that until we read his suicide note that he pinned it on marijuana. He was 31 years old, so it was not in my household. But I learned about insight and about impaired insight, and that addiction, the disease of addiction, is impaired insight. And what you've now done, Ethan, what your whole story speaks for what happens when you regain your insight, and you can see it in your friends that are still using, that say, come on, you can use again. They have impaired insight. They do not see that yet, and it's a brain function, and it's a brain function to impair insight. That's a natural function. Our brains need to be able to shut things out at certain times. It's an important thing to know how to do, but when it goes wrong, when it's impaired, you experienced what happens is you're addicted to a substance and continue using. I don't want to be a preacher here. I just have a lot of years of experience in talking with people like you and talking with parents and living it with myself and living without my son now. My son's name was Andrew, was Andy, and you have his eyes, even looking at you tonight and wishing you were my son, telling this success story. So I hope you'll keep telling people. It's so important. Thank you for being here tonight.
Wow.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you, Sally. That was a lot.
Yeah.
Sorry about your son. That's unfortunately way too common right now. Apparently, like it seems. Oh yeah, I need a second to take that in a little bit. And you're right about insight. I think insight is a good factor of whether or not somebody will recover from it. I say that with a heavy heart, and I think insight's possible no matter where you're at. Just getting them to realize and admitting that something's not right and they're going down a bad path, and that's possible. It is possible to get to that place. You're looking at somebody who, if you told me, if somebody talked to me when I was in high school about this and I was still smoking, I probably would have laughed it off the first time, you know, like whatever, like it's just weed, it's just weed. And then you start to see the parents, you start to see the passion in other teens speaking about it. I think would really get them. And I've already convinced some teens to stop, which is awesome. And
Yes.
I think you're right with it's an age thing, because then kids are always gonna be like, oh, you don't understand, you know, parents don't understand. And even though clearly they do, they grew up with it too. But the potency stuff, and I like to tell my story. I kind of like to reel them in with the fun times I had with weed, make them relate to like all the hooligans and all the stuff I did while I was high, to kind of reel them in and get them to a relatable level, because that's probably where they're at, is enjoying weed, and then kind of show them how fast it went downhill. I think that's the strategy I like to use. And so, yeah, I was one of you. I'm not just somebody who tried weed once and said, and this is, yeah, it's like I was an addict, and it's possible to recover. It is. And it's preventable. That's what's awesome about it. It's preventable and it's reversible. Like, what better thing could you ever ask for if something is reversible? Like, you don't really get a lot of second chances in life. And a second chance on your sanity is, can't think of anything more important.
Ethan, this is Heidi. I've been driving and I pulled over a minute ago to make a comment, and right in front of a pot shop, as it happens. But I just want to know how moved I was by your story, and also how your brush with death. I mean, if you had just thought about it 1 second longer, you might not be here. You know, I mean, that was really moving to me, and I'm so grateful that you came to your senses when you did.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that. That's something I kind of brushed over. Thanks, Heidi. That's something I really kind of brushed over is, you know, Robin Williams said suicide's like a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And it's just, when you're that low, it's easy to say in hindsight, like, oh, things will get better. But when you're that low, you really need to surround yourself with good people. I think the only reason, not the only, but one of the main reasons why I'm alive today is because of my support system. That'd be my girlfriend, my mom, my sister. You want to fight for them, and you want to fight for yourself, most importantly, because I have aspirations. You know, I don't want to be homeless. I don't want to be working at McDonald's. I don't want to be working at a factory. You know, I want to do good things, and that doesn't happen with marijuana. You can't. There's no happy ending with marijuana. There just isn't. No, I see it.
You know what though? In some fields, like I've heard people, musicians, other artists, they justify it as a part of their creative process, or that everybody in that is successful has done it or is doing it. I mean, what would your comment be?
So I think it's like do at your own risk. You know, I think there's no, I know some people also say that for seizures, the dabbing helps prevent that. But I just think there has to be something else out there than high potency marijuana, you know, and I don't think there's any creative benefits of dabbing. And when they say they smoke just low potency flower for that, I can see that. But even then, if you're not 25, I think 25 is that magic number. And I'm not saying after you're 25, you can smoke whatever you want, but your brain's a lot less susceptible to damage after you turn 25. So those musicians and those creative thinkers who think weed is opening up their mind to different pathways that they never thought of is probably true. They're probably more creative on it. But at least they should know the risks. I think if you're able to sit down with them and know the risks and know what they're putting themselves into, you can't know the risk of schizophrenia, weed-induced psychosis. They have to make that decision for themselves. But I think most psychosis occurs because of high potency marijuana. So the lower, especially CBD, that end is not as dangerous. That one's a tricky one. That one I still kind of debate in my head, because you're like, well, what about the 90% of people who don't go through cannabis-induced psychosis? You know, what about them?
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to do a quick little detour here for you, because I had psychosis on low potency marijuana when I was young. And so I'm one of those people who can't tolerate any of it. And it was super frightening for me. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know who I was with. And then I'd remember, and then I'd forget and remember. I mean, it was horrible. So there are some people who can't tolerate any amount. And my brother really liked that feeling. To him, that was fun. And it didn't scare him. And so he used it regularly, and he has schizophrenia. So
Damn.
that's a sad, low potency story. So
Yeah, and it's like, I guess it all sums up to, you're playing with fire. You know, you're really rolling the dice. You're really kind of hoping it doesn't happen to you, because everybody's going to be like, well, it's not going to happen to me. Everybody's going to say that. But even if you don't have a predisposition for, because they say, like, with a predisposition for schizophrenia, bipolar, if you have any psychotic illness history in your family, you're probably not going to react well to weed. But there's several Danish studies out there, and several studies saying that even with no history of mental illness, people are still becoming psychotic off of marijuana.
Yeah.
And you don't know if that's going to be, you don't know if it's going to be a joint or 10 dabs that does it. You know, and the people who use it creatively, those are going to be the hardest people to convince. Well, some of the hardest people to convince to stop, because they see it as healthy and they see it as beneficial and as their career, a tool for their career. And that's kind of tough.
well, thank you so much.
One of the things that's interesting about that is there's doctors, I forget their names now, but they're famous in this field. I should remember their names. I'm sure Sally and others know. And they have a hospital in England. And so, you know, when people have said to them, oh, I play guitar better, or I, do this better, do that better. And so they say, well, do you mind, taking some, and then I'll videotape you. Anyway, when they do that and they play it back to them, they're like, oh, I guess I don't. And I've heard a musician also say that they actually wrote better music when they stopped and they got sober, versus when they were using. So anyway, interesting stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'll have to look into that. That's interesting.
Yeah. So
Thanks, Bart.
Thanks,
Sure.
Bart. Yeah, that's cool.
I have a similar story about someone who experimented. They thought they were skiing really well, going down, and somebody's videotaping because it wasn't skiing very well. So it's so true. You think you're doing better than you are.
Right. I remember writing things and I shared with Ethan that I used a lot of marijuana growing up every day, and would write these things that were so creative and so prolific. And I found them several years ago. But well, let's just leave it there. They were kind of stupid. So I don't know if it's real or not, or you just perceive you're being more creative.
That's really interesting. That's intriguing.
Yeah.
I think we were kind of talking about that earlier, about insight. Your insight was impaired.
Right. You're right. Are there any more questions for Ethan? We're coming up on, we passed the hour mark. Does anybody else have any questions? I do want to say that Ethan's story, he has a great way with words, and you can read it on Every Brain Matters. And well, just look up his name on Every Brain Matters, and it'll take you to his written story.